Well, Mike, good to be with you. And secondly, to answer your question, it maybe is a surprise to those that are outside of New Orleans that at least are not dialed into this football team. But going back to training camp, there were obvious signs that they were going to have their struggles this year, along with the moves that they made this offseason, getting rid of guys like Jimmy Graham, Kenny Stills, et cetera. You thought that maybe the offense would be able to overcome some of that, and so far it hasn't. And then, obviously Drew Brees getting banged up certainly didn't help. But, you kind of felt like with as many starters they were going to have that were new, I'm talking about rookie starters, and you look at those guys currently right now that they're counting on, and I'm talking about Ha'oli Kikaha, Stephon Anthony, Bobby Richardson, an undrafted rookie free agent, Damian Swan, a fifth-round draft pick. Delvin Breaux is, by NFL standards, a rookie, even though he spent time in the Canadian Football League. So, yeah, you could see this kind of coming, especially when you open up against Arizona. I mean, look, they dropped that Tampa Bay game, and they shouldn't have lost that ball game for sure. But, it doesn't surprise me at all that they're sitting here 1-3. I also expect them to beat the Dallas Cowboys. If you were asking me back in May if they were going to beat the Cowboys in Week 4 on Sunday Night Football, I would have said no, just because I thought Tony Romo and Des Bryant would be healthy and playing for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, and what did you take from that game? I mean, is this a Saints team turning the corner? I mean, is this just a team that they caught on the right week? What did you take from New Orleans winning that game?
Can I answer it kind of like both? In other words, what I mean is there were some things on the defensive side of the football that you watched on Sunday that that you look at and you could be encouraged by. But they still have their areas, their warts, if you will. That turning a corner, I don't know if I'd quite say that as much as it is. You saw some improvement on the defensive side of the ball, but offensively, and they need to be more efficient on first and second down. They've got their struggles there, not getting separation from receivers. So Drew Brees is holding the ball a little bit longer. They haven't been able to establish the run early in ball games. They got it going a little bit late last week against the Dallas Cowboys. But, again, I think that they're going to continue to have this up and down kind of these games because they're playing so many young players on the defensive side of the football. But you want to see the growth, and you saw a little bit of that from those players that I mentioned earlier and those rookies.
Is there a desperate feel around this team? I mean, at 1-3 with two teams in your division at 4-0 already, I would assume a loss is realistically ends their season or any hopes of a division championship for that matter. But is there a feeling of desperation coming to Philadelphia?
I don't think so. At least that I can detect in the locker room, talking to the players or certainly talking to Coach Payton. You don't feel that, but I would imagine internally they have that. They have that pressure. That's probably very real to them. But at the same time, if you look at it, well, what does a win do at 2-3? I mean, it looks like Carolina and Atlanta are going to run away with this division. And even at 2-3, if the Saints were to go up there and get a win against Philadelphia and then turn around on a short week, they're playing the Falcons here next Thursday night in the Superdome. I would not, just because they beat Philadelphia, I would not then feel like, oh, yeah, they're on a roll. They got a chance to topple the Atlanta Falcons. They're not better than the Falcons. They're not better than the Carolina Panthers. But, yeah, I don't think there's any kind of panic or anything like that from this team or this organization. I think that it's a very realistic appraisal of where they're at as a team, and they're trying to get better. But will that improvement take place drastically and quickly enough? Is it going to be week 4, week 5, week 6, or is it going to be down the road in weeks 10 and 11 when, like you kind of mentioned, you probably will be way out of the race by that point?
Yeah, Kristian Garic, WWL, and, of course, the Saints Radio Network. And, I look at a stat from the Saints allowing almost 10 yards per pass. Last week, we finally saw Bradford going down the field. He's got his best performance of the year, 270 yards, 3 touchdowns against a pretty bad Washington secondary. How would you describe the Saints secondary?
Interesting. Before getting Jarvis Byrd back a little bit last week and also Keenan Lewis back a little bit in kind of the sub packages, they were porous. And look, a guy that they went out and spent some money on this offseason, Brandon Browner, by Pro Football Focus rankings, is the worst cornerback in the NFL. And he was starting with Keenan Lewis out opposite of Delvin Breaux and with Jarvis Byrd not in there. I don't think that they wanted it certainly to look like that, and they were kind of masking some deficiencies being down so many players in that secondary. I think that it certainly has their weak spots, but with Keenan Lewis back now, that gives you some flexibility. Brandon Browner doesn't have to match up necessarily against those speed guys. He's better suited to play tight ends and play bigger receivers and jam them and kind of beat them up on the line of scrimmage. But one of the things that I found interesting, and this happened in the offseason when the Saints signed him to a 4-year deal. First off, they missed out on him the year before he went to and played for the New England Patriots. They were in hot pursuit of Brandon Browner last offseason, and then he chose New England. But when he signed here in New Orleans this offseason, I got a text message from somebody in the league that said, look, he's going to be good for 2 penalties a game and 2 big plays a game. And at the time, I was like, that might be a little bit of a harsh evaluation for that player, but and that's really, though, it's been pretty accurate. That's what he's been. Known to do here in the first 4 games for the Saints. He's had some penalties. He struggled covering, especially the speed receivers. Now, last week, what was interesting was they kind of matched him up against Jason Witten, and that's where his skills are, I think, best suited to help his defense. Like I mentioned earlier, bigger receivers or these tight ends that he doesn't have to necessarily keep up with 4.4 blazing speed. He can kind of maul them on the line of scrimmage and disrupt things that way.
Should be interesting. Breeze, obviously a much better track record than Kirk Cousins, and Cousins went down the field on this team and led a late touchdown drive here. What are you seeing from Breeze now? I mean, he missed a game with injury. Obviously, as you get older, you lose a little bit, but do you see a big drop-off from Breeze?
No. Look, I think a lot of that has been overblown, but look, you haven't seen the big vertical plays that has been a hallmark of this Saints offense in the passing game from the past. They don't have those weapons, one, and then two, it's just not been there because I think not being able to establish the running game hurts their ability to take shots down the field, and also, when Breeze has a banged up shoulder, look, you're gonna have a hard time pushing the ball 55 yards down the field in the air on a vertical shot. Maybe that was last week, and he's made. Look, one thing I know, been around, covered Drew Brees for a while, is he's an odds beater. He's kind of made a career of doing that. So, his arm might be a little stronger this week. You might see some more shots down the field, but you haven't seen it even when he was healthy in weeks 1 and 2. You didn't see him throwing the ball down the field. It's kind of been a dink and dunk kind of offense. And the approach from defenses has been interesting where, they rarely blitz Drew Brees and they'll sit back and play coverage and make you dink and dunk. And if you think about that, there's not a lot of offenses that can go 80 yards without a penalty, without a drop pass or a misfire, an incompletion or what have you. So your percentages go way down in terms of keeping that drive going. And conversely, for a defense, you like your opportunity. It's kind of like a bend but don't break approach.
All right, one thing with the Eagles, I was counting up before. They played last week with 7 starters out at the end of that game. What is the injury situation for a Saints team that just, capitalized on a Dallas team that's losing a lot of guys? But are the Saints a healthy team coming in?
Well, I'll tell you, Teron Armstead, their starting left tackle, who's, in my opinion, perhaps 1 or 2 of the best left tackles in the NFL. He's been banged up with a knee injury, hasn't practiced all week. We're going to get the injury report today as to how he'll officially be listed in his game status for Sunday. I mean, typically when a veteran player doesn't practice on Wednesday or Thursday and they're dealing with a knee injury, a good sign that he's going to be able to play on Sunday. So that would put Andrus Peat, the club's first-round draft pick, 13th overall, in at left tackle on the road. And Andrus Peat has worked at left and right tackle in training camp. He's more of a right tackle than he is a left, even though he played that in college and in high school. But yeah, that would put Andrus Peat making his first start of his career in a very, very intimidating environment against an Eagles front that, by all accounts, I view as a pretty good one. So that's where the health concern would be. And then also at guard, Tim Lolito has been banged up. He's on the injury report for 2 straight days missing practice with a back injury. So Mike McGlynn, if he's called upon, the veteran, would play left guard. So you're talking about the possibility of having your entire left side of your offensive line kind of kind of as a I don't want to say replacements, that's a bad word, but your starters won't be in the ball game, so there's going to be some getting used to each other on that side, and I think the Eagles could probably take advantage of it. I know this.
Welcome to the club right there, right?
What's that?
Welcome to the club there. This line has been a disaster.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I think offensive line play in general across the league you're right. It's been terrible. It goes along lines with kicking, but I think it really, to be fair to the offensive line, because of OTAs, and this is not just the Saints, I'm talking about across the NFL, because of the OTAs and how much they limit contact now, these guys really can't. The offensive lines and defensive linemen, they need that contact to really work themselves into shape. And I think you'll see the play get better weeks 7 and 8 when they're really used to that part of it. But going back to the Saints though, I felt better about their chances of going to Philadelphia and getting a win if Teron Armstead was healthy and then Tim Alito was healthy. Not so much anymore.
I'll leave you with this because obviously the Eagle fans, I mean, when Kelly got here, it was like a party. Everybody thought this was going to be, the new thing. Here we are in the third year, and not so much anymore. People are starting to question. But I'll ask this question. Down there, what is the perception of this Eagles team entering the week? Do people think that this is a high-powered offense, or are they looking at the Eagles for face value, a team that is really struggling on the offensive side of the ball and maybe figured out Kelly and his offense a little bit?
Well, I know something that I'm quick to point out. For the third straight year, the Eagles are at the bottom of the league in time of possession, and that's something that I think in the NFL is a very tangible stat that you have to pay attention to because it puts your defense on the field a little bit more than you want, and when you're not able to execute that offense the way they want it, you're off the field. And if you're not getting points, it's one thing to get a lot of points and still be at the bottom of the league in time of possession, but when you're not doing when you're not doing that, then that really changes things for you. The way they look at it, I know the way I look at this Eagles team is get DeMarco Murray the football more. I think he'll solve a lot of your problems. And Chip Kelly, I don't know. I've always kind of watched him from afar and been a fan that he's a against the grain kind of thinker, and I like that, a contrarian kind of approach. But I had always wondered when he came from Oregon, was his style exactly going to work? And we'll see as it kind of pans out here. But I know Eagles fans are growing increasingly frustrated, as they should be. Especially as passionate as Eagles fans are.
Well, they've seen Chip Kelly once in the NFC wildcard game, 2013. The Saints won that game 26-24. The second time they'll meet in the Kelly era comes this Sunday right here on 97.3 ESPN, your home for Eagles football. Kristian Garic, WWL, the station down in New Orleans, with, of course, a look at the outside view on the New Orleans Saints. We appreciate your time.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Real good stuff. And he mentioned, as you hear many people do who cover this league, time of possession. Third straight year, Eagles at the bottom, 609-573 ESPN. You asked the question, does it matter? Well, I know Kristian's been covering the Saints for a long, long time. As he mentioned, I've been around Drew Brees a long time. I bet you Drew Brees thinks time of possession matters.